7 people, 7 miserable participants tonight. Okay, I think a lot of you haven't shown up yet. Yeah. Okay, but technically, not only 7, it's actually 9. Hello, hello. Who is online tonight? Is Anshika here? Is Anshika here, do you think? Presume? All right. So tonight I got 2 guests. I have Jasper and I have Josh. Wave, please. Yeah. All right. So if Anshika, you're there, Josh is here. Yes, I am still at tuition center. So are these 2 gentlemen still with me at the tuition center. Yes, I am still at tuition center. So I have to switch off this thing. Okay. Hi, Dian. Okay, we're going to begin now. All right, so today we are going to try to cover a lot. Okay, it's 9 p.m. Right? I don't want to drag too long, but I can kind of sure that I cannot make it by 10 o'clock. I actually stretch a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover 3 classes of events. The first class of event is known as the change in demand. The second class of event is called change in fixed cost. The third class of event is called change in variable cost. You should have received a worksheet together with the notification. If you had forwarded the link to your friends, right, who are not my student, I hope you also forwarded the worksheet to them so that they can have a worksheet to work with you. If you forward your friend and didn't forward the worksheet, please forward the worksheet so your friend can follow with it. Right, so we have 3 classes of events. So in total, 6 events, right? Rise in demand, fall in demand, rise in fixed cost, fall in fixed cost, rise in variable cost, fall in variable cost. And we're going to look at the short run effects and long run effect of each of the market structures. So a lot of things need to cover. Now, how will they test this in exam? If you are year 5 or JC1 students, note in your school JC1 promo exam, there is a chance that they might set a low order part A effects of event question. That means they give you an event or give you 2 events and ask you to explain how these events affected the firm in a particular market structure. They might not give you the market structure, they give you a real world industry and you're supposed to figure out what market structure is the best fit, apply to the market structure and do short run and long run. But some of your school teachers may be a little bit demanding. They might ask you to say, okay, analyze the combined effect of these 2 events on the firm's short run and long run profits, right? Based on whether it is MPC or oligopoly, right? They must do 2 market structure, 2 concurrent events, right? So it makes it very, very tough. So J1 or year 5 student, there is a chance your promo will set test like this or your next class test might set like this. If you are J2, right, then you can be quite sure that this won't come up in your as a low order question. Why? Because Cambridge has never set this question before as a low order question. Cambridge always set this as a high order question for discussion of effects. So it's more of an effects or event question rather than a policy question or usefulness or concept question or desirability of state question. So it's typically effects or event question. So what's the short run effect? What's the long run effect? What's most likely outcome? All right, so with that, then let's go to the very first scenario. So we start with PC. Now, PC is the least likely to come out in the exam. So I will run through PC very quickly, right? But it's important to understand things from PC point of view to help us get a better sense of the logic behind. So let's begin with, assume that the market is initially at equilibrium. So the industry diagram on the left, you have an equilibrium at demand and supply intersection, and the firm is making normal profit at long run equilibrium. So then I introduce my first event, which is the increase in demand. So let's use blue color to represent a rise in demand. So when we draw PC event, we draw at the industry level. So the economy, or rather the market moves from equilibrium E0 to a new equilibrium E1, where the equilibrium quantity rises from Q0 to Q1, while the price rises from P0 to P1. Now, so immediately now you're going to ask me, do I go through market adjustment process? Am I going to say at the original price level, there's a shortage, upward pressure, movement along demand, movement along supply? Don't need, right? You do that only if it's a demand supply question in a demand supply topic. If this question is clearly a firm's question, right, then you just skip the whole process by simply saying that as the demand shifts to the right, the market equilibrium changes to from E0 to E1, where the equilibrium price rises to P1 and quantity rises to Q1. Now, once we are at this price, then the firm, being a price taker, will have a new AR curve and MR curve. So AR1, MR1 will be higher. Now then, once you have a higher AR-MR, you can identify the new profit maximizing point based on MRMC condition. So MRMC condition give us a new quantity, Q1. Now in your school, your teacher probably keep to capital letter Q throughout both the diagrams. However, I have personally, my habit is to use small letter Q to represent firm level output. Capital letter Q is industry level, right? You don't have to follow my convention. You follow your school convention of using small letter, all capital letter, that's fine. As long as in your mind, you know we're talking about firm or talking about industry. Right, so what's happening is the firm level output increases. The price obviously rises because of the firms being a price taker. Then once your quantity go up to Q1, okay, watch from Q1, right? We draw a dotted line up to where the AC curve is. That's where we determine the AC1. So this is where we have our supernormal profit area being determined. So then that's it, right? Short run equilibrium done. So let's look at short run effects. Short run effects will be price increase, market output increase, firm level output increase, the firm's average cost of production increases. Now, when I say AC rises, it's not saying the whole AC curve shift. We're saying that the dollar value of average cost on the axis is now higher, right? So as a result of this, profit, right, rises to supernormal level. Right, that is your short run equilibrium done. Now then, we move on to now long run. So once we have short run equilibrium, what this does is the supernormal profit will attract entry of new firms into the market. However, in the short run, can new firms enter? Cannot, right? Because the new firms have the existing firms are experiencing high enough entry barriers in the short run to block new firms from entering. So in some of your school notes, right, inside your school notes, under characteristic number 4, they only talk about no entry barriers, right, for PC, but they never mention that it's only in the long run. Right, in the short run, all market structures have to have entry barriers because, right, if there were no entry barriers even in the short run, then new firms can enter in the short run. Then the firms cannot actually earn supernormal profit, which is one of the performance aspect that we recognize, that all firms in the short run can earn supernormal, normal, or subnormal. So the fact that they can earn supernormal, normal, or subnormal profit in the short run equilibrium implies that there are exit barriers and there are entry barriers in the short run. So now the supernormal profit will attract new firms, but the short run entry barriers will block them from entering. So nothing else changes. End of story for short run. But then in the long run now, under PC, all the entry barriers will disappear. So with the disappearance of long run entry barriers, what you will have now is what happened is that new firms will now enter the industry. As new firms, so long run effects. Sorry, let me change my ink to a thicker ink. The long run effects now will be new firms enter the industry. So market supply increases, right? So there should be a market supply curve shift to the right. Now, where does it shift to? It should shift to until a point where the firms can only earn normal profit. As long as the market supply doesn't shift all the way until normal profits for each firm, right, it will still attract new firms to enter, right? So at long run equilibrium, market supply must shift until it intersects market demand at E2 equilibrium, which is at the original price, right? So P2 must come all the way back to P0, and the market equilibrium quantity rises to Q0. Now, here's a very important point. So the important point the important conclusion we draw from perfect competition, right, is that in this theoretically perfect market, right, ultimately, right, what determines price of a good? Demand has no role to play in determining price. Because what determines price ultimately is factor cost, right? Cost of production. Because the long run price always falls back to the same price, no matter what. As long as there's no technological advancement, there's no increase in quantity of resources in the country or increase in quality of resources in the country that raises productivity, right? You will always have market price always equal to the lowest point of the long run average cost curve of a good, right? That means demand has no role to play in determining price. But right, the flip side of this argument is that demand becomes the sole decider of output, right? Demand ultimately, whatever people buy, right? Supply will keep adjusting until the market reaches that long run equilibrium. So hence the term consumer sovereignty, right, comes from this idea that consumer is the king, right? Consumer is the one that decides resource allocation. So whatever consumers want, the market provides, right? So that means consumer ultimately, right, rule resource allocation in a capitalist world. All this is under one very extremely strict assumption that all markets are perfectly competitive, which obviously is not true, right? All right, so then at the new equilibrium, P2, then the firm's AR-MR curve will now shift back down to AR2, MR2. So the line comes back. The market equilibrium, the firm's equilibrium quantity falls back to Q0. So Q2 equals to Q0. And the firm goes back to normal profit. So the result is price falls back to original level. Q rises further. Small q falls back. AC falls back. And profit falls back to normal. Right? So this is the effect of a demand increase. So let's summarize. When there's a rise in demand, the temporary implication here is that it drives shortages in the market, drive up prices. Then these higher prices, right, help firms earn higher profit. When firms earn higher profits, right, it signals to factor owners outside of this industry to bring resources into the industry, so thereby increasing the market supply as number of firms increase. This, by the way, is called your signaling function of price, right? Rationing function and incentive function that you learn under demand supply topic, right, is movement along demand curve and supply curve as price changes, right? The signaling function is essentially a long run effect where supernormal profit caused by rising demand signal new entrants, right? So that's how your entry of new firms come in to do resource reallocation in the country, right? So you can think of this as a different chapter, but you also can think of this as a deepening of our understanding of demand supply chapter, right? All right, so this is the increase in demand. Okay, let's quickly move on now to the flip opposite scenario where you have a decrease in demand. So if I have a decrease in demand, so demand falls to D1, equilibrium drops from E1, E0 to E1. So market quantity falls to E1, market price falls to P1. And because the firms are price takers, so AR falls to AR1 and MR1. So new profit maximizing point based on MC-MR intersection drops to Q1. So quantity falls. Look at what happened to average cost. Average cost rises, right, above the original AC. So AC, so short run effects. P rises, P falls. Market quantity falls. Oops. Right. Each firm's quantity fall, but the AC rises. Profit falls to subnormal. Now, at this point, do the firms shut down or do the firms not shut down? Well, we don't know, right? Maybe shut down, maybe don't shut down. For simplicity, what we can do to make our life less complicated is say, let's assume they didn't shut down in the short run. right? Why? Because maybe they can still cover their fixed costs. So if they can cover their fixed costs, they wouldn't shut down, right? So what exactly is happening? What is happening here is there are exit barriers, right? Short-run exit barriers that prevented the firms from leaving. So what exactly are exit barriers? A lot of students don't understand what exit barriers are. Exit barriers, right, are literally your fixed costs, right? The fact that I still have fixed costs that I have to incur even though I stop production, right, tells me that if I can produce and earn enough revenue to cover variable costs or maybe even more than variable costs, then I can defray some of the fixed costs. So my exit barriers are literally my fixed costs. All right, so then this is the short run equilibrium, assume the firms don't shut down. Then what happens in the long run? Then your signaling function will happen, right? In the long run, firms will start to reach long run and then fulfill shutdown condition and they start to leave, right? As they start to leave, market supply will shift to the left and that brings us to a new equilibrium, E2, where the price rises back to P2. Notice again, the outcome is the conclusion we get from before. Consumer never get to determine price, right? Cost of production, technology, QQT factors determine price, right? But consumer entirely determine how much of the good get produced by using the signaling function to direct resources, in this case, not into the industry, but direct resources away from the industry out to other industries. All right, so this is the exit of firms. So as the firms exit, the price falls back to P2, then everything goes back to original. Quantity rises back to Q2, right? So the firm goes back to normal profit. So long run effects, right? So everything goes back to original state except Q fell even further, right? All right, can I pause here for a while and address all the JC2 people for a while? JC2 people, remember you learned that a bit of inflation is seen as a good thing, right? Because why? A bit of inflation is a reflection of economic growth, right? When economic growth happens, income rises, people buy more things, right? So why would we expect a bit of inflation? It's because a bit of inflation is needed to signal resource reallocation here. So the way the market in theory is supposed to work based on classical economics, right, is to have the market adjustment process trigger this signaling function through higher prices and higher profits for firms. That's why, right, when there's economic growth in the country, we would expect a little bit of inflation and be okay about it because that little bit of inflation is what is needed for the functioning of the price mechanism. Right, so this is why we need. So now you have I hope year 2 JC2s, right, you now have a better appreciation of why we accept a little bit of inflation as a good thing, right? Because it actually ties in back to this topic, right? So those of you who are NYJC and VJC people, you notice that when you are learning macro in JC1, you actually haven't learned firms yet, right? So you're actually learning a point without actually understanding the underlying concept. But it's okay, right? Now you know, right? Now you know the underlying theory behind it. All right, so then this is the firm side. Now, for the perfect com demand side, right? If there are any questions along the way, please feel free to type in and ask. Okay, I don't know if you've got time to ask or you're just rushing to copy, right? But two of you can feel free to ask. Barriers to entry is short run or long run. In the short run, there are barriers to entry across all market structures, right? Just that in the long run, perfect com will have no more entry barriers and no more exit barriers. Okay, so that's your perfect com scenario. All right, so then let's go on now to, hey, where's my mouse? Okay, so I want to now jump forward all the way through to page 8. Is that page 8? Sorry. Page 8 now. So let's go to MPC increase in demand. So how do we analyze the same event, increase in demand for MPC market, which is something that is more likely to test for exam? All right, so what is the effect of demand increase? So first thing we do is we make a simplifying assumption that the demand increase leads to a parallel shift of AR curve. Right, so let's take a simple simplifying assumption that there's a parallel shift of the AR curve to AR1. Sorry, my line is not very straight, but you have use a ruler, please, at home. Right, then your MR curve, right, should be following what rule? MR curve should have the same vertical intercept of the AR curve, but has a gradient twice as steep. So that should give us a parallel shift of the MR curve as well. Sorry, very ugly. My line look like a curve. Still looks like a curve. I suck at drawing straight lines. Okay, something like this. All right, then, okay, now you're going to get confused. You're going to wonder, right, how come got all these intersection points? Okay, sorry, let me draw this. I don't want to get you all confused. I'm going to shift it out really far. Okay, so this way, I won't intersect all the wrong stuff. Sorry, it's still bad. Okay, imagine it's parallel, okay? Imagine it's parallel shift. So the intersection of these two, MRMC gives me Q1. Okay, so Q, short run effects. Q rises. Then what happened to price? P rises. What happened to average cost? Now watch, please. So because Q is rising, then the firm will produce further to the right? So normally we will have a lower average cost. So AC falls, not a shift, not the curve shift. It's just at a lower point on the AC curve. Now, can you tell what happened to profit? Obviously, profit will be from normal profit becomes super normal profit, right? So then profit rises to super normal. So, okay, I never mentioned just now, how come I start with normal profit? It's because monopolistically competitive industry, in the long run, right, they are only earning normal profits, right? So that's why we start our analysis by assuming MPC industry long run equilibrium first. Then we introduce our event. Kind of like if you are, I don't know, physics student, right? If you're going to look at how an event affect a system, you assume the system is at rest, right? So you assume a pond, right, where the water is completely still. Then you say, I toss a pebble in the pond. Then I look at the effects. I start from long run equilibrium, right? So then my disturbance is my event that caused demand to rise, and I have super normal profit. Now, what's going to happen to this super normal profit? Is it going to attract new firms to come in? Is it going to trigger a signaling function? It should, right? It should trigger a signaling function, but short run, entry barriers, right? So because there are entry barriers in the short run, then there's no further effect of this event in the short run. Then now come to the long run. What happens in the long run? In the long run, entry barriers will drop to 0 or near 0 for MPC, right? So when your teachers say little to no entry barriers, you can treat it as no entry barriers, right? It's treated as, that means new firms can come in. As new firms come in, how do I show this on the diagram? In the perfectly comparative market, there's a market diagram that shows supply curve shift to the right. That's a whole industry. In MPC, right, we don't have an industry level diagram. We only have the firm level diagram. Why? Why don't we have an industry level diagram? It's because to get an industry level diagram, I need to sum together the output of each firm. But because they're selling slightly differentiated product, right, it's not as easy to add across, right? My chicken rice and your wonton mee and his lor mee, right? Cannot just add so easily across the board, right? So because of slightly differentiated product, we cannot sum the output across these products to get a market diagram. So we can only get from a firm diagram. So how to interpret entry of new firms? So you got to think of entry of new firms as fewer. Each firm is now having less of the market share because I got more competitors fighting for my market share. Like for example, there are five restaurants in this town, right? And there are 1,000 people who live in this town. On any given night, right? A certain percentage of the families will choose not to cook and go out and eat, and they can eat at the 5 restaurant. Suddenly, a 6th restaurant open up, right? Surely won't be like nobody eat there one, right? So some people will eat there, right? And then this will cause each of the other remaining 5 restaurants to have less sales, right? So the way to show this is that the AR curve must shift in. Okay, but before we draw this, here's the important logical thinking process. As the AR curve starts to shift in, the revenue starts falling, the profit of the firm starts decreasing. As the profit is still supernormal, as long as still supernormal, it will continue to attract new firms in the long run. That means, and the market share of each one just keep falling and falling and falling until you reach normal profit. So that means the long run equilibrium must be get back to normal profit. So where is that? Isn't that just a parallel shift back in and go back to original point? Well, not so simple, right? Because now with new firms coming in, right, your number of competitors increase, the demand for your product become more price elastic. So not only must it shift in and become a little less steep. As it becomes less steep, right, then your gradient start to change, right? So now your new line will have to shift in. If it shift in parallel, it gets back to this point. But if it shift in and become non-parallel, let me use a different color. If it shift in and become parallel, it must get to this point. If it shift in and become non-parallel, it has to go somewhere a bit to the right of this point. So I need to now draw a new green line, right, that is tangent to the AC curve. Oops. A new green line that is tangent to the AC curve. That call this my AR2. So it's tangent at this point. Now, here's where the tricky part is. If this is a tangent, then I need my Q2 to be at this point. I think I might have to, hang on. I think I might have to open Smartboard. MR will change. MR will change. Hang on, let me open my Smartboard first. Is my Smartboard up yet? Oh, it's very slow. There it is. Okay, one moment, please. Let me remove this. Share screen. All right, so let me now draw this. All right, so this is my original AR, MR, MC, Q naught, P naught. This is my AC curve. Yep. Oh, sorry, my user screen is not showing. Thank you for spotting that. Sorry. All right. So then with my AR shifting out, MR shifting out, so my new profit max quantity, price, and AC. So I don't know if those at home can see this. Do they get to see my Zoom? Oh, shucks, they don't get to see my Zoom. Okay, that failed. They do? Yeah. Oh, okay. Because it's lagging a bit. So my original point Let me use yellow color. My original point was here. Now my new point is here. Then when my ARMR shifts in, right? If it's parallel shift, right, it should just get back to the original point. But because now, right, I have to let the gradient tilt to become less steep, right? So it cannot be shifting in and tangent at this black point, at this black color line, right? It has to become a little flatter. That means my green color line, right, has to be tangent somewhere here instead, right? So my new AR2, because it has to be less steep, it has to be tangent to the AC at the point further to the right, which means now, right, here's the tricky part, which means that the Q2 now will lie somewhere between Q1 and Q0, right? That means the initial increase in demand pushes us to Q2, but when it pushes back, right, it pushes back only to Q2, doesn't go all the way down to Q0. Now, but wait, this is profit max, right? If this is profit max, right, means MRMC must cut through this point, right? MRMC must cut through this point because it's an MC curve, right? So that means my MR curve has to start from here to cut through this point to give me MR2 to make sure that I have a profit max point. Okay, can you see the? Okay, you don't get this part, huh? Okay, so this was my original AR. This is my profit max point. This has to be a tangent, right? This has to be a tangent, right? So when your AR curve shifts to the right, I get to a new profit position. But when my AR curve shifts back in, if it's parallel shift, right, it will come back to this same point only, right? But because my gradient has to change and become less steep, but it must still be a tangent because it has to be normal profit. Then how can a linear function that is less steep be tangent to the same curve? It must be tangent further to the right somewhere, right? So that means the tangent must happen like this, right? So then this becomes my Q2, right? And this was my Q1, right? Okay. All right. So this is the idea of how to draw the graph. Okay. So now let me bring back my other screen. Here, this is it. Correct. AR1 and MR1, you move it how much also doesn't matter, yeah. Just that you don't make it so cramped, give it more space. Otherwise, the diagram look very all cramped up. All right, so the long run effect of this is that Q falls but not fully back to original level. Price, what happened to the new price? So the new price, because it's now further to the right, right? So the new price will be a bit lower. So new price P2 falls, right, more than it initially rose, right? So P2 is lower than P0, whereas Q2 is still higher than Q0. But that has to be, right, in order for you to have sell more quantity, you must have an even lower price. Then profit falls back to normal profits. Right, profit goes back to normal level. All right, so this diagram is a bit challenging to do. Now, because this live stream is recorded, so feel free to, after this, rewatch it again, right? As like rewatch again for any parts of it that you need more clarity, right? Rewatch however many times you need. All right, so now that we finished the rise in demand, then let's quickly run through fall in demand. So if it's a fall in demand, what's going to happen? AR curve parallel shift in, MR curve parallel shift in, then Q falls from Q0 to Q1, price falls to P1, AR rises to AC1. So the firm now gets into subnormal profit. Will the firm shut down? Maybe, maybe not, right? So we assume for simplicity that the firms don't shut down, not because it's true, just because we don't want to complicate matters. So we assume for simplicity, firms don't shut down in the short run because there are exit barriers, right? And then now in the long run, as firms leave, each firm that leave the industry, remaining firms will now take over their market share. So think of your village, right? Got 6 restaurants. Then all are not making enough money, right? But they cannot leave because their fixed costs are high. But in the long run, right, when their rental contract expires, right, then they will one by one close down. Now, who will close down first? Whoever's rental contract expire first will hit the long run first, right? That restaurant will close down first. But the moment that restaurant closed down, right, the very next night, right, the townspeople who come and eat dinner, right, will find that, hey, there's one less restaurant. Oh, let's go to the other 5 to eat, right? So the demand for each of the other 5 will start rising. If it's not enough to keep them afloat, more will close down, right? Until eventually everybody end up making only normal profit, right? That's where the AR curve, MR curve shift back out to reach normal profit, which is tangent. But then now, because there are fewer firms left, right? So instead of 6, 7 restaurants, now left 3 restaurants, right? Then you got more market power already, right? So the AR curve becomes steeper as well, but still normal profit, right? So as you shift out and tangent at this point is normal profit, right? So now I need them to have a steeper curve. So I choose a point a little bit to the left of the curve now to draw my AR curve. So my new AR curve is now tangent like this. So my AR2. So at this new AR2, I find my Q2, which rises back not fully. So I have my P2, AC2. Then where's my MR curve? Based on my Q2, my MR has to cut the MC exactly at this output. So from here, I draw my MR curve. Then I finish my diagram. Is it possible for Q2 to be less than Q1? Technically, that's possible if the AR curve gets steep to the point, right? So it's possible to happen. But we don't really have any strong reason to believe. So normally we just draw in between, right? But if you want to draw it less than Q1, it's still possible, mathematically possible. But that would mean the firm gains quite a lot of, make the good become quite price inelastic, right? So maybe no longer MPC. Then you are complicating your diagram. Okay. All right. So Dian, why less steep is referred? Okay, let me go through. So Dian, when you say why less steep, you are referring to the increase in demand, right? So less steep is because as you have more new firms entering in the long run, so Dian is asking for the previous case, right? When more new firms enter the market, then each existing firm is now facing more competitors. So the demand, your good got more substitutes. More substitute, your demand become more price elastic. That's why it's less steep, right? So conversely, right, when firms leave the industry, each remaining firm has fewer competitors, less substitutes or fewer substitutes, the demand more price inelastic, so becomes steeper. Yunti, your question is, do I need to draw MR curve? MR2, yes, you will need to draw MR2, have to. Right, and shrimp, that's such a cute nickname. Usually, when demand falls, AR/MR shift in. Do we need to shift MC? No, you don't ever shift the MC if the event, right, is a demand shift. Right? If it's a demand shift, it's just AR/MR shift out. The adjustment to the long run, right, is exit of firms or entry of firms. It is still AR/MR that is shifting, not AC. Right? AC, MC don't move for this kind of event. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Shrim. If my answer doesn't address what you're asking, please follow up with a follow-up answer. Huh? Okay, so sorry, those of you who are online, Jasper, who is here in person, is asking, sometimes, right, we don't have to draw gradient change. Why? Actually, it depends. In some schools, your teachers teach shift in, that means the long run adjustment, they still treat as parallel shift. So some of your teachers choose to simplify even further and treat as parallel shift. Is that allowed? Yes, it is allowed, right? So why do those teachers choose to adjust long run with a parallel shift? Because to them, right, if the industry is already MPC, right, there are many small firms, right, add a few, subtract a few, it's not going to change the elasticity in that big a way, right? Then why add more complication, simplify? Do they genuinely believe it won't change? No, right? They know that it will change, but to them, is the change maybe so small, right, that there's not enough marginal benefit to worth drawing so complicated a diagram, right? And that's why they do this. They suggest to teach you a parallel shift. Now, then some other schools insist you must adjust the gradient. Why? Because those teachers believe that Cambridge will reward you with that. Will Cambridge reward you with not recognizing the gradient change? Probably yes, right? Probably they'll do. But are you going to mess up your diagram and make the whole thing look horrible because of this? If you will, right, then I suggest you just go back to parallel, right? But if you can draw nice and big and spacious, right, and make it very clear, then I think you should try to draw it that way if you can. But if you can't, then just stick to parallel, might be better. Kind of like, if you're going to a singing contest, right, don't sing a song that's beyond your level, right? You can sing a song too difficult, right? Then you mess it up, right? Then you're just going to look terrible and then you're going to lose the competition, right? So sing a song within your range, okay? Parallel shift Q2 equals to Q naught, correct? Parallel shift Q2 always equal Q naught, P2 also equal P naught, correct? All right, so Angela, wait, ask me to wait for what? Why you all like to start with wait one? You and Angela both same. Every message I get from you whole day is wait, Mr. Lee, wait for what? Wait, I'm doing a case study about budget and full service airline, and the answer talks about how there's a higher increase in AC for full service airline due to lower EOS, from fall in demand. Okay, so that's movement along, right? That's movement along the LRAC curve, right? So what they are talking about here is when your when your demand falls, your quantity decrease. As your quantity decrease, the firm produce fewer units and is moving leftwards along the falling arm of the LRAC, right? That's how the firm faces higher average cost, right? So how we present our answer in our diagram, that's the way you can present. It's a AR/MR shift left and movement along AC. Just that for Angela, you need to label this graph as LRAC to show the movement along LRAC curve. Okay, I have whoever this is, JTZ. I thought for a normally you would just draw SR change and LR no need. Depends on the question. If it's a effects of event question, high order, you are expected to go to long run. You're expected to do the short run effect and then the long run effect. You almost never get to stop at short run. I don't know where you're getting your information from. Okay. Correct. You can draw IUS, you can draw SIAS, but in the adjustment process, you don't touch AC. In the adjustment process, you don't touch AC. All right. FR. Your profile pic quite cute. May I know when MC shifts and AC shifts and when do both shift? Okay, so we'll get to that in a while, right? We'll get to that in a while. All right, so FR will come to a question just momentarily. All right, so now we have seen demand change. Now what I want to do is to look at fixed cost change. Suppose there is a decrease in fixed cost of firms in the PC market. What will happen? Now, there is nothing that will change in the demand supply diagram. The demand supply diagram that we draw here, right, are short run demand supply diagram. Fixed cost is not affecting the MC. So you must first note that the supply curve in the PC market industry is the sum of the supply curve of each firm. Each firm's supply curve is the MC curve. So therefore, if it's fixed cost changing, the MC curve doesn't change. MC curve by definition, okay, FR, please note this is the question you're asking. The MC curve by definition is called the marginal cost. It is the increase in your total cost because I'm producing more. By definition, fixed cost will never change as a result of producing more, right? So MC curve only can change when variable costs are changing. When fixed costs alone are changing, then only the AC curve will shift, MC curve will not shift. So the way to illustrate this is to have your AC curve shift down. Now, as you draw your AC curve shift down, please take note of a very, very important point. The point is your MC must still intersect your AC at the minimum point of AC. So as you draw this shift, make sure the intersection point of MC and AC is at the minimum point of AC. Okay, so if you have a difficulty drawing this graph, because you don't know how to do one stroke, right? Then the method is to first choose a point that you want to be the minimum point on the graph, then go on to that point, go to the left, and then go to the right. This is how you get your minimum point correct for sure. Now, once you're here, where is profit maximizing point? Hasn't changed. MCMR intersection. So P1 and P0 is the same level. Q1 and Q0 is the same level. So market demand don't change, right? Market supply also don't change. Nothing, absolutely nothing changes on the industry level, right? Then only thing that changes is your average cost now falls and your firm earns a supernormal profit, right? All the PC firms earn supernormal profit in the short run. So what happens to supernormal profit? It will attract new firms to enter because of the signaling function. But entry barriers, they cannot come in. So then nothing changes. So short run effect done. So let's write this down. Short run effects. P, no change. Q, no change. Small q, no change. Right? AC falls. Profit rises to supernormal. Now, then what happens in the long run? The signaling function will work. New firms will enter. As new firms enter, what will happen to the market supply? Market supply will increase. Right? So where does market supply increase? So this is where it gets tricky. My market supply will increase and cause the price to fall. The fall in price, because the firms are price taker, must eventually get all the firms to end up earning normal profit, right? And where is normal profit? Normal profit must be at this point. So my AR2, MR2 must be at the lowest point of the new AC curve. So my Q2 has to fall. So my P2, AC2 has to give the firm a normal profit. Then, okay, watch the magic now. So as I extend back to the left-hand side to get to my P2 and Q2, this tells me that my new supply curve has to intersect at the inside demand curve at this exactly at P2 price. So that every firm being a price taker at P2 now will only earn normal profit again. So Diane asks, what kind of event would decrease fixed costs? So for example, let's say I open a restaurant. My fixed cost obviously is my rent, right? Then sometimes, right, due to economic downturn, right, the government might implement cost-cutting measures as a short-run supply-side stabilization policy, and it might give rental rebates to all shop houses that rent from HDB, for example. And that actually happens. That actually happens during COVID, right? That also happened during the 2009 global financial crisis, right? The government actually did give rental rebates. So other than wage subsidies, they actually give rental rebates. All right. Then I have another question. So you need to draw the demand supply graph together with the price revenue cost graph for perfect comp only. Yes, correct. Music Live, that is the only graph you can draw demand supply anyway. Because as I said just now, MPC firms, each firm is selling a slightly differentiated product. You cannot add together to draw industry diagram. MPC, all the more, oligopoly also all the more cannot add because it's highly differentiated good. But then monopoly, right? Monopoly, there's no need to draw it because monopoly is the only one firm, right? So the AR curve of the monopoly is actually market demand curve. The supply curve, okay, so Jasper asked why supply curve doesn't include fixed costs. It's because the supply curve in a market supply curve in a PC industry is the sum of each PC firm's supply curve. And each PC firm supply curve is the firm's marginal cost. Right? The supply curve of each PC firm is defined as the firm's marginal cost. So therefore, fixed cost change will not affect marginal cost, right? Therefore, will not affect supply curve. YMC in the PC firm is the okay. So I got a question now. So Jasper, why do I need to know why MC curve in a supply? Okay, why MC curve in a PC firm is a supply curve, right? Yes, by right you are supposed to know. I don't imagine how they will be able to ask you a question in the exam, but by right you are supposed to know. And the answer is very simple. The answer is, what is the meaning of supply curve? Supply curve is at any given price, what the supply curve is a graph that tells me what is the quantity supply a firm will willing to sell, right? So if the PC firm's price MR curve is horizontal, MC curve intersect MR give you the quantity. At whatever is the price, the intersection point of MC tells you the quantity, right? Then that is the supply curve. That's the meaning of supply curve. Right? Supply curve tells you what are the P and Q values, right? The price of the good and what's the corresponding quantity that firms are willing and able to sell, right? That's why it's always only the MC curve. Okay. No, the rest of the market don't have supply curve. The rest of the firms don't have a market supply curve because there isn't a line, right, that connects the P and the Q on one curve, right? So all the other market structures do not have a supply curve at the firm level even. Okay, so only PC firm. Yes, question.
You mentioned that the supply curve is reflective of the sum of each firm's MC, right?
Yes.
If the MC didn't shift,
then the market supply wouldn't shift.
But then how come
so, but because supply curve, right, is the sum of each firm's MC, right? As more firms enter, then you're summing more firms MC, right? Because let's say there were 100 firms, then you sum 100 firms MC curve to get market supply curve. Now there are 120 firms now, got 20 new firms come in, right? Then you're summing 120 firms MC curve. So the market supply shifts even though each firm's MC curve didn't change. Okay? All right. Okay, so now with that, let's go to fixed costs, decrease in fixed costs for MPC. So in MPC, if there's a decrease in fixed cost, same thing, we shift the AC curve down. Please remember to keep the minimum point. So MC must cut AC at the minimum point of AC curve. So don't forget that. Then what happened to P? So P1, no change. Q1, no change. Everything unchanged. Except now, AC has fallen. So the firms are now earning super normal profit. Then will that attract new firms to enter in the short run? Yes, it will, right? But can they come in the short run? Cannot, because there are entry barriers. So what happens? What happens is that in the long run, new firms will enter. As the new firms enter, each firm's AR and MR will now shift in and become steeper or less steep? Less steep. More firms enter the market, so each firm's product got more substitutes available. With more substitutes available, your AR becomes less steep. But it still has to be tangent because we know that they have to get to normal profit, right? So we just arbitrarily choose a point here to draw a AR curve that is tangent, but make it such that it is a little less steep. Okay, so once I have this, I can mark out my Q2. Now, can you see where to draw MR2? MR2 must cut through the point here, right? Where MR, MC intersect must give us the correct Q2. So you have your MR2 here. Right, so then you have your P2, AC2. Then we get normal profit. So fixed cost, very, very easy to draw. Right? Fixed cost, really, really easy to draw. Fixed cost decrease, or then the increase is just the opposite. Right? So in order to save time, I am going to skip the increase in fixed cost. You practice on your own. Okay, so now let's go to perfect com again. This time we play with variable costs. So which one you'll play with? Increase. Let's do increase this time, right? Let's do increase in variable costs. Now, this one very troublesome, huh? Very, very troublesome. What is changing now? Variable cost is changing. Variable cost change means MC must shift up, right? AC must shift as well, because AC is the average of all your costs, right? So variable cost increase, AC must change. Fixed cost increase, AC must also change. It means any cost change, AC shift. So now I need my MC to shift up to MC1. Now, where is my AC going to shift? So there are 3 different places to shift AC. You can shift AC such that it cuts through the minimum point exactly above the original quantity, or you can make it go a bit to the left or go a bit to the right, right? Mathematically, right, what determines where the AC shift is and where the MC shift is? Mathematically, it can happen either way. So then it's up to you to assume, right? So there is no right or wrong answer here. Choose either one. For me, I personally, in absence of any numerical value, right, I always like to choose the case where it's directly above, because it makes my diagram much more neater. So I will choose this point. So where's my MC-MR intersection? Now my MC-MR intersection is here. New Q is here. Okay, wait, industry diagram changed or not? Industry diagram should change, right? Change to where? supply increase, right? Decrease or increase? So the supply have to shift, decrease, right? By how much though? Supply have to shift by this height, right? Because MC shift by this height, right? So now I have to push this guy all the way up, right? To get my supply curve to shift by this height, right? So my variable cost increase now causes my MCAC to shift, but my supply must shift by the same vertical height. Now then, where's my new price? My new equilibrium from E0 now jump to E1, right? So I have a new market price. Short run now, these are still short run, huh? And my quantity falls, right? But wait, if this is the case, then wouldn't my P changes? If my P changes, then my AR1, MR1 also change, right? Then wait, this quantity wrong, right? Because this quantity is based on the OMR, so I must go to the new MRMC point instead of the OMR. Must take the new MR point, intersect the new MC. This then becomes my correct Q1.
This is all short run.
All short run, right? Then where is my AC? My AC will go up to here, and now my firm earns subnormal profit. And this is just short run. Okay. Now, so what's the chance of them testing perfect comp? Very, very low, right? Which means this very complicated diagram, right? It's good to learn theoretically to understand what's going on, but don't get too worried about it for the exam, right? The chances of this coming up for exam is much lower, but it's important to learn the logic behind. All right, so then now I have so now I have the short run finished already, right? So what happened in the long run? Assume for the moment nobody shuts down in the short run, right? Even though they make some profit, assuming that they still can cover variable costs. So in the long run, when their maybe rental contracts expire and then they face shutdown, some firms say shut down first because their contract expire first, right? Because different firms have 3-year rental contract, start at different time, end at different time. So those that end their contract will start to shut down. As they start to shut down, the number of firms in the industry will start to decrease, right? As the number of firms in the industry start to decrease, then what happens? The market supply will continue to shift, right? Left as the number of firms get less and less until eventually every firm earns normal profit, right? That means the market supply must shift all the way until here to get us to P2, Q2, and then each firm now, being a price taker, will earn only normal profit back at original quantity. So now what have we shown? Now we have shown, right, when costs increase, right, what happened to every firm in the long run? Every firm in the long run remain back at the same size. They just charge a higher price to reflect the higher cost. That means they fully pass on all cost increase to the consumers in the long run. So at the end of the day, what determines market price? You realize consumers have no say in market price. The market price is always determined by cost, right? Right. So any cost increase is passed on to consumers. All right. So again, let me pause J1 for a while. J2 people, please pay attention. So when we talk about unit cost of production, let's say increase or decrease due to exchange rate appreciation or depreciation, then we say that the SRAS curve shift up or shift down, right? And then they pass on any changes in cost to consumer in terms of prices, right? So we are saying that the full change in cost will be passed on ultimately in the long run, right? If we are assuming all perfect comp. But the moment you're not assuming perfect comp, then you can even argue that some of the cost changes don't even get passed on entirely, right? So that's something you can also use in macro side as a micro foundation to explain some of the points that you want to make, right? Okay, if you're lost, you're J2 and you're lost at what I just said, right? Then never mind, ignore what I just said. You can happily live life without knowing that detail. All right, so now we have rise in variable cost done for PC. which is a very complicated one. Let's do the more reasonable one for your syllabus, right? In the exam, what are more likely to test? So you go to increase in variable cost for MPC. So in MPC, if I want to draw increase in variable cost, first I draw a MC curve shift up. Then I want to draw an AC curve shift up, right? Okay, where, now the point is where does it shift? Again, I want to make my life simple. I take the original minimum point and I want to maintain that same minimum point, right? So I just draw my new AC curve like this. All right, so now where is my, so there's no market supply curve to shift to get a new price because the firms are not price taker, right? So I can completely ignore the market supply curve since it won't exist anyway. So what I do is I simply take the MRMC intersection, right? So based on this MRMC intersection, I get my new Q1. So Q1 falls. So higher cost, right, will be passed on to the consumer in the short run. But can you see the increase in price is small or big relative to the cost increase? The cost increase is the red color line. The price increase very small, right? So in the short run, the MPC firm will absorb the bulk of any increase in cost, passing on only a little bit, right? Now, in the PC market, we saw that's the same case also. The price increase only a bit in the short run, but in the long run, the price must rise fully to reflect the cost increase. Is that true for MPC? Well, let's find out. Right, so in the short run, the firm now earns subnormal profit. Right, so again, let's assume that firms do not shut down in the short run. Assume for simplicity that at this point, their revenue is still enough to cover the cost. So then this is short run equilibrium. Now, in the long run, what happens? Then some firms hit their rental contract expiry date, right? And then they no longer cover their costs. They will shut down in the long run. So as firms shut down, remaining firms that haven't left yet start to face higher demand. ARMR start to shift outwards. But this time, parallel shift or steeper. Now steeper, right? Because fewer firms left. So ARMR shift out becomes steeper. So where is my AR curve? So if I parallel shift out, it should tangent somewhere here. If I make it steeper, let's tangent a bit to the left. So I just draw a AR curve like this. So AR2, then this is my Q2, right? So Q rises. Then at this point, MR must cut through here. MR2, right? And P2, Q, AC2. So what happened now in the long run? In the long run, the average cost shift up, right? But then we'll have a movement along the curve to reach a new level on the AC curve such that the new AC increase to AC2 is matched exactly by P2, the new price change. So that means in the long run, ultimately, the firms will still pass on all the cost changes back to consumers. That's why the firm end up with normal profits. All right, so this is the way we draw the adjustment to long run for MPC firms for variable cost increase. Okay, so I do the fixed cost decrease for you. You can try out the fixed cost increase yourself. I did the variable cost decrease, then you try the variable cost decrease yourself. Huh? All right, so with that, then we finish PC, MPC already. So then now let's go to oligopoly and monopoly. Oligopoly and monopoly, the difference between this and MPC, right, is we start off with supernormal profit. Because it is typically expected that oligopoly and monopoly have supernormal profit to begin with. So what happens when there is a supernormal profit to begin with and I have a demand increase? So now we're on page 14. So if there's a rise in demand, so AR curve went up, MR curve goes up. The new profit maximizing point, MRMC, will give me a new Q. Based on the new AR curve, I get a new price. So When demand rises, firms are happy. I get to sell more. I get to charge more money. But because I'm producing more units, right, my average cost falls a little bit. So overall, my profit should rise, right? So P higher, AC lower, Q higher, profit increases. Now, then there's short run equilibrium, right? Will new firms be attracted to enter? Yes. But can they come in the short run? Cannot, because of high barriers to entry. Then now, when we get to the long run, what happened to barriers to entry? No, this is oligopoly, monopoly. Entry barriers are still high, right? So the new firms that wish to come in, can they come in? Still cannot, right? Then that's it. Long run equilibrium is the short run equilibrium, right? Very simple, right? So for oligopoly and monopoly, rise in demand is the simplest case. So there was supernormal profit, there is now bigger supernormal profit in the short run equilibrium, and in the long run, it remains as a bigger supernormal profit. No more difference. Now, but what happens if it's a decrease in demand though? Now it gets a bit tricky. If it's a decrease in demand, then the firm initially was supernormal profit, right? If now the decreased demand caused the supernormal profit to become smaller, then what will happen in the long run? Then nothing will happen, right? The supernormal profit will attract new firms to enter, but they cannot come in. Then the long run is equal to the short run. What if the short run effect is not to supernormal, it's from supernormal drop until normal? Then no new firms will come in, right? Then no problem anyway. So it's the same. So it's only when it's subnormal. When it's supernormal, drop until subnormal, then in the long run, firms will leave the industry. Then when firms leave the industry, then AR, MR must shift back out again to at least go back to normal profit. All right, so this will be the long run. So then which scenario you do? Do you do all three scenarios in the exam? Cannot. You got to look at the information given in the essay or case study. If this industry is very high supernormal profit type one, right? Usually oligopoly very high supernormal profit. So if there's a recession, right, what will happen to the profit of the firm? Will it go into subnormal or will it probably go into smaller super? Smaller super, right? Then you choose that case. Unless the question in the essay or case study tell you that this recession is so severe that it pushes these companies into subnormal profit. So unless there's strong evidence to suggest it went to subnormal, then always assume they still at supernormal. Okay, then that'll make your life really, really easy. Okay, so you will have to shift until you go below, right? If you want to go to subnormal, you have to draw your AR so far below, right, that your new profit maximizing quantity, the firm's price cannot cover its average cost, so it will have subnormal profit. Then in the long run, some of these firms will shut down. Then the ARMR of the remaining firm will shift out and become steeper, right? And then how go to what profit? You can go back to normal or you can go even higher, right? All right, so this is the oligopoly. Now here, oligopoly and oligopoly should be change gradient, because you cannot argue that gradient don't change anymore. Now it's not MPC, many hundreds or thousands of firms, right? Small number of changes won't change gradient. So oligopoly should change gradient. All right, so then let's go on to fixed costs then. For fixed costs decrease, what happens? If there's a decrease in fixed costs, then you just draw your fixed cost change. What happened to Q and P? Q and P, absolutely no change, right? Because MRMC condition did not change. Only thing that changed is your AC had fallen, profit got higher. And profit got higher, what happens? Attract new firms to enter, yes, but long run still cannot enter, right? Then that's it, end of story. So oligopoly, monopoly, very, very easy to do. Short run to long run, right? As long as the profit is still normal or super normal, there's no further adjustment. So the only troublesome case, right, is when the profit went to subnormal, then it becomes problematic. But that case is also less likely to happen because oligopoly, monopoly normally have supernormal profit, high supernormal profit to begin with. All right, we got a question from Angela. Let's look at her question. For the same question just now, do we draw two separate diagrams for 2 airlines, but then compare how the AC increased. I don't remember which exact question we are looking at, Angela. I need to see the exact question. Can we take this after the live or privately? So because offhand I don't know exactly which is the question you're referring to. Is it the 10 series one? I also don't remember exact detail for now. All right, so let's finish off this. So this is the fixed cost decrease. Now, fixed cost decrease, surely profit rise. It's only fixed cost increase, then you're going to be concerned about. So looking at the exam questions that the examiner give you, you're going to see what's happening. I vaguely remember, Angela, for your question was cost of new airplanes are falling, right? If I don't remember, that Cambridge question was jet fuel was becoming more expensive, but the cost of new aircraft was decreasing. That's an example of fixed cost falling, right? Because the airplane that you buy is a fixed cost. Jet fuel obviously is variable cost. Jet fuel prices, or rather, jet fuel is variable factor of production. Fly more jet fuel, right? Your aircraft, you don't have to buy new one every time there's a new flight, right? So there is fixed cost falling, variable cost rising. So Cambridge, right, can set questions like this as a high order question. 2 events, fixed cost falling means AC shift down. Variable cost rising means AC, MC shift up. That means AC itself got 2 opposing shifts, right? So that's how sometimes examiner can complicate things for you, right? Now, when I see a question like this, right, they complicate until like this, right? For me, it only says one thing: don't choose that question, right? It's like, what if it's case study? You case study, you tell yourself, right, then calmly analyze properly, because, right, and then you rest on the assumption that it's bell curve. A lot of people are going to die, right? A lot of people are going to die so badly, right? Because they just don't know what's going on, right? So you just calmly analyze. Fixed cost only change AC. Variable cost change AC, MC. If one event lower AC, the other one raise AC and MC, then MC surely rise, but AC got 2 opposing shifts, right? Then you have to decide whether on balance, whether AC end up higher or lower. If it's an explain question, you explain the effect. If it's a discuss, then you're going to say you're going to evaluate which shift is bigger in your opinion. I would just draw one diagram as the final outcome by arguing in words beforehand which shift is dominating, right? Or I wouldn't draw AC shift one diagram, MC AC shift another diagram. Then I draw a third one to combine, right? Too time consuming already. If it's case study, how many marks will it be? Max only 10 marks in a case study, right? It will never make sense to draw 3 versions of the diagram, right? AC shift one diagram, AC MC shift another diagram, and then the third one is resultant. I just go straight to resultant diagram, okay? Because it's only going to be 10 marks maximum, right? Maybe even less. Maybe this question 8 marks only. All right. So then lastly, let's deal with variable cost. So let's see increase in variable cost. If there's an increase in variable cost, my MC shifts up, my AC also shifts up. Let's again keep things simple. So with AC MC changing, my profit max quantity changes to Q1. My price goes up on the same AR curve. Price rises, AC rise further. So I have subnormal profit. Again, can the firm shut down in the short run? Possibly, right? Let's assume for simplicity that they don't shut down. And then if they don't shut down, then nothing happens in the short run. Now what happens in the long run? Then in the long run, there will be new firms. The firms will leave. As firms leave, then the AR and must shift out. Shift out to where? Then you got to decide. Shift out to normal or shift out to super normal. It's possible to go to super normal because, right, oligopoly, the firms are big. If one big firm closes down, right, the remaining firm might have such a large increase in demand, right, they push back to super normal. Then how would you draw that? Then you just draw the AR2, right, MR2. Then the new profit maximizing point is here, right, Q2, P2, and then AC2. So the firms restore back to supernormal profit, right? So the increase in cost, so think of it from a narrative, right? Let's look for a narrative to explain this in the layman terms. When the variable cost increase, it becomes more expensive to operate in this industry. It will hurt firms, right? Firms' profit get hurt. If it hurts to the point where they earn some normal profit, right, then it will be a survival of the fittest. Those who cannot survive are going to leave. And those who remain will get to earn super normal profit again, but it may not necessarily be higher profit than the past because after all, costs did go up, right? They live in a new reality where there's now a higher cost. But at least the remainder that survives, right, at least will earn normal or maybe even super normal profit. But we will end up getting rid of some firms, right? So this is but look at what happened to consumer. The price went up from P0 to P1, it rise back to higher to P2. Ultimately, right, the higher price has to be passed on to the consumer. Okay? The gradient of MR doesn't matter. It becomes steeper than the original because fewer firms left. How steep, right? Don't matter anymore. You don't need to worry about where it comes because we are not drawing normal profit. Normal profit, then we have to have the tangent and stuff. Right here, we're doing super normal, then however high also can. Okay? So this is the way we analyze for oligopoly/monopoly case. So this is the analysis of three classes of events, right? Three classes of events: demand change, variable cost change, and fixed cost change, and the impact, short run impact, long run impact across four market structures, but actually only three because oligopoly, monopoly always can do together, right? So which ones will they test you? I am pretty confident they won't test perfect com, right? I'll be quite shocked if. Okay, I'm pretty sure your school won't test perfect com. A level, I won't say never. I'll say very low chance, but who knows, right? Cambridge examiner just go crazy one day and decide to test. Assume a perfectly competitive industry. Then you're like, right? Part A, 10 marks, right? Then too bad. I mean, actually, it's not hard. It's not hard at all, right? If it comes out, just do it, right? But most of the time, it's application, and you'll be, okay, I repeat how they'll test you. They will test you either effects or event on one market only. So you've got to figure out which market structure to use, either MPC or oligopoly or monopoly. Or if they want a meaner, they will give two markets, right? Comparison of the effect of one event. Now then, what can the examiner do to change this? They can lower the complexity of this. Instead of two markets, only one market, right? Instead of compare MPC oligopoly, they just say, oh, this industry, right? Airline or telcos, for example, is oligopoly, right? But then that makes the question easier, right? So they raise back the complexity by giving two events. So it's two events on one market or one event but compare two markets. So they can adjust the complexity of the question by making it to two events but one market structure, or one event, two market structure. Then the school teacher, this is where the school teacher can come in and really be like, really kind of tekan you and bully you, right? Two events, compare two market structure at the same time. This kind of question, right, really don't choose really. Then if it's case study, right, then just die together with everybody else anyway, right? Because two event, two market, 15 mark also I don't want to do, right? But if it's case study, 10 mark or 8 mark, right, sell, right? So cannot, those kind of like just out to kill question. But Cambridge can also do a low order 4-mark case study question, right? Instead of a two event, one market structure, or one event, two market structure, they can do one event, one market structure, right? One event, one market structure, explain the effect only, right? Also possible, right? Now, if they can do this in the short run, they can do, if they ever do this as a Part A question or a Part B question, then, which Cambridge so far never done before, only 8 schools have done before, short, low order question for effects. Then what will be a Part B that can follow up? Strategies, right? So policy question, what strategies might firms use, right, to deal with the fall in demand or deal with the rising costs? What can they do to survive better, right? So that will be a follow-up Part B that is policy question. Okay? Can? All right. So anyway, is anybody got any pressing question last minute? Because it's already 10:23, so I've exceeded 23 whole minutes. For?
Two event, one market
two event, one market structure is basically you can either explain one event first or another event and merge together, or you can just explain all the shifts and put into one graph at one time. I normally will put all the shifts in one graph rather than explain separately, because ultimately if I explain one, I explain the other. So I won't do a sequentially one event after the other. I will straight away explain all the shifts into one graph and explain the combined effects. So using your MRMC condition. All right. So, okay. So anyway, let's stop here today because it's late and I think some of you need to go and sleep already. So if you got any follow-up question, please text me and ask me. If you are not my student, but you got a question to ask, either ask through one of my students or you just key into the chat, the YouTube video, the recorded version, the comment section. I'll respond. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for your time.